Welcome to Exascale Day. I'm John Brown, and I'm going to be your host today, which means you're going to be seeing an awful lot of me. We've got a ton of excellent content from some of the smartest people on Earth, and I absolutely mean that. You're going to love Exascale Day. So what is Exascale Day? It's a celebration of the supercomputing industry and all that it accomplishes, and we finally have the first verified exascale machine, which means it can process 1 quintillion operations per second. Or put another way, a billion operations per second. Or put another way, 10 to the 18th power operations per second. Which is why we celebrate on October 18th. It's 10/18. That amount of computing power is ridiculous. That's more operations per second than the largest plastic surgery practice in Beverly Hills. That's true. With all that power in our grasp, what are we mere mortals going to do with it? That's what we'll be discussing with the leaders from the front lines of supercomputing who we've gathered here today for this celebration. Let's get started. So, what good can really come from all of this? In this first conversation, we'll unpack and hear how some of the world's leading researchers are using data for good.
Hello, everybody. I'm Janice Sankis, and I'm the Vice President for Innovation for Social Impact at HPE. And in that role, I have the opportunity to lead many Tech for Good projects. And one thing in common that I find across many of these projects is that contributing to solutions requires an exchange of data and providing data for public good. That means having the ability to discover, to access, to share, to model, and to use data across disparate, distributed organizations that may be completely unrelated. And oftentimes when we're able to do that, we can achieve great things. So today we're going to talk with 3 esteemed panelists about how technology, and including data, is being used to help solve some very important and complex problems. So I'd like to welcome, first of all, Christine from Southern California Earthquake Center. And Christine, could you please introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm the Executive Director for Applied Science at the Southern California Earthquake Center, so SCEC. And I coordinate research that takes the fundamental science into applications, so going forward to eventually policy, preparedness, engineering.
Okay, next up, Andrew.
Hey, I'm Andrew MacArthur. I'm a David Braley Chair in Computational Biology at McMaster University in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. My research team works on genomic surveillance of infectious agents, including COVID.
Okay, and Andreas.
Yeah, welcome. And my name is Andreas Prein. I'm the Deputy Director of the Capacity Center for Weather and Climate Extremes at the National Center for Atmospheric Research, NCAR. And our research is focusing on how weather and climate is changing in the future.
So we've got some really important and interesting projects that we're going to cover here in the next few minutes. So I guess I'd like to start out with, first of all, understanding from each of you, how are data and supercomputers being used for good? What global problems or societal problems are you solving, and how does tech or technology contribute to those?
So we know earthquakes can be very devastating for us. Fortunately and unfortunately, we don't have a lot of recordings of those large events that disrupt society, both with injuries, death, and a lot of economic losses and so on. So at SCEC, we really work on collaborative projects involving several people touching earthquake disciplines to better understand the physics of the earthquakes. That's more the fundamental part of it, and also their impact. And we use big data processes like machine learning to understand, for example, the seismicity patterns and to really locate exactly where the earthquakes are in the crust. We develop models with inverting a lot of data of what we expect the crust to do to the waves as they propagate, attenuate them and all that. We simulate earthquakes over long time spans. So we develop a network of faults and so on, and then we let the earthquake simulators go through a million years and kind of see how the load transfer, you release stress when you have an earthquake in a place, but you can put stress more on another place and so on. And then you trigger earthquakes. And we use all those different types of computations and high performance computers with the intent to learn about earthquakes and to help forecast what we can expect from the earthquakes we haven't experienced yet. And that the ultimate goal is to impact society, make it more resilient. So they're prepared, they know what they expect, emergency managers are prepared, and eventually impact the building codes as well as such.
Fascinating. Andy, can you tell us a little bit more from your perspective?
Yeah, my research is focusing on how climate change is changing extreme events. And we see that extremes are getting more intense. Many of those extremes are getting more intense and more frequent. And one of our focus areas is droughts. And the southwest of the US, for example, is in a severe drought since more than 20 years now. And what we try to do is to help water resource managers in this very stressed region to basically manage their valuable water resources better. And the only way we can do that actually is by numerical modeling. So if you work on the climate system, you cannot go in a lab and play with the climate system. You need numerical models. And this is really intimately linked to high performance computing. And high performance computing really allows us to provide this information to the general public and policymakers.
Yes, I think that's a lot of compute required for that. Andrew, I know when we talk about societal problems, you've had a very recent example with the work that you and your team have done on COVID and having a global pandemic. So Andrew, could you share a little bit more about McMaster's role in COVID research?
Yeah, I think, underpinning, matching the other questions, bioscience has undergone a revolution in the last 20 years. DNA sequencing technology is just getting faster, smaller, cheaper, and higher throughput and becoming routine. So what took me 6 years in my PhD in the 90s, I do for about $100 in an hour now, which is kind of depressing when you think about it. But because of that market change and that technology, we're deploying sequencing in food safety or studying cardiovascular disease, but in particular for threats and surveillance around infectious agents. We've been preparing for the pandemic. So the original SARS came out. We did not have this capacity. We could not look at the genome or variants or develop vaccines quickly as a result. And so the trouble is you need very, very high confidence in the data. So even if you're working, say, one sample, one swab from one patient, you might generate several million data points to get confidence. So scale that up to a pandemic with tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, you run into a severe computational challenge.
Yes, and you guys did that, exactly.
Yeah, so we really came to it that it was about volume. We do a lot of, there are other pandemics that are less obvious going on, and that's steady work. But we really came at it from an engineering perspective that when the first cases came to Canada in March, that we may only had a dozen the first few months, but we were soon going to be thousands. And we really went from an engineer's perspective. How are we going to do, in medicine, turnaround time is everything. If you can get turnaround time under 5 days, that really helps the clinician. Generally, that's not where this field sits. So we had to do some really advanced engineering to get to those turnaround times.
Wow. So Andy, another area that's impacting all of us is climate change and the droughts that we're all facing. Can you tell us a little bit more about your research in climate?
Yeah, so Andrew, like we're in a similar boat, but I think we're working on a longer time horizon. So what we are looking at is more seasons to actually decades and centuries. So we try to understand how droughts are changing due to climate change, but also to understand what the next season will bring in regards of how much water the Southwest will get. So we use global climate models and weather forecasting models, and we run those on supercomputers. And actually you can find predictive skills, which is very encouraging in today's models, where you can basically provide information to water resource managers a season or 2 seasons in ahead. So this really allows them to basically plan better for what is coming and really make better use of the water resources that they have.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about the future now. So I want to ask each of you, what you hope to accomplish, and importantly, why is this area important for you? Why are you passionate about this work? Why are you doing this work, and what do you hope to achieve? Christine?
So the biggest thing is to help reduce suffering of society. That's kind of the simplest way to say it, but we have both the intellectual curiosity of understanding different phenomena. I think it's in there, and there's a lot of scientists to do that. But for me, the interest is really having those impacts, helping society prepare, having better seismic national hazard maps and so on. So for the future, we want to continue to do that. And I think it's really important to be able to integrate the knowledge that comes from data as we update our models and so on, to integrate that rapidly into a forecasting system. I don't like to use the word prediction because people misunderstand we predict earthquakes. We cannot do that yet. I don't think we will in my lifetime. But the point is forecasting what would happen if. And that, as we get better models and all that, it's really critical that we integrate that in the pipeline really quickly, a quick turnaround. And it takes a lot of different types of people. For at SCEC, we have geodesists, geophysicists, seismologists, engineers like me, computer scientists. All those people need to work together, and that's really critical. And I think we will continue to see more of this collaboration, and also learning from other fields, because what Andreas does and Andrew does, there's a lot of things that are common. We develop models, we validate them, we forecast, and we go back at data, and it's all the same loop. And I think we can learn from each other because we work at different scales, different time scales also. And so my dream for the future is when we keep improving those models to really have an impact.
Mm-hmm. Andrew, why are you passionate about this area?
Yeah, I'll say, one of his personal motivation, my grandfather was a code breaker in the Second World War, so it runs in the family. And essentially what I do is I, break genetic code to understand pathogens and outcomes and help produce the data for others can make predictions or develop better therapeutics or vaccines. I won't kid you, we're entering this century of infectious disease that we have not seen in a very long time. It's going to be very challenging, but the capacity to overcome it is greater than it has been, but we really need to be able to generate these data. And so that's what's rewarding. It's essentially, I'm a throughput point. The samples from the patients, the rest come through, and useful information comes out the other side for clinicians or drug discovery or public health or politicians who have to decide when to open up schools. So that's very rewarding to lead that. And there's multiple points pandemic where we could see what we did help people make the difficult decisions.
Yeah. And Andy, what do you hope to achieve?
Yeah, I also have a very personal relationship to this topic because I grew up on a small farm in the Austrian Alps, and I experienced 2 floods and very dry years during my childhood. And I really learned from personal experience how it is that you have your livelihood depend on the weather and the climate of your region. My hope is really what I see what our community is going towards is to build what we call digital Earth systems. So it's I think similar to what Christine and Andrew just said. It's really this convergent science where you're not only working with atmospheric scientists, but you really include also hydrologists, you include oceanologists, but also social science and population dynamics, for example, to really build a more holistic system that can help us to predict future states of the weather and the climate more holistically, and also economic impacts, for example, and mass population movements and things like that. So I'm very excited about that. And I think the Exascale movement with HPCs will open up a lot of these research areas that we are looking at there.
That's a good point. So you bring up HPC. I'd like to kind of bring the conversation back and tie it to technology. And some of you have talked about the role that data has in accomplishing your mission, and the role that you've used supercompute resources for. Anything more to add about that before we start to talk about what's next? Or maybe we tie this together. What technology is going to enable in the future for you?
Well, I think that definitely having more powerful systems that can produce results more quickly, ingest data and all that is really important. The potential to have more of the data in the cloud, and instead of transferring it all to the HPC, having these connections, being able to not necessarily having all the data ingested by HPCs is one thing. I must say that there's a challenge for us though over the years whenever there's a new system that comes up, and I think the general public doesn't understand that, but it's not like you just have a new Mac or a new PC. It's completely new system. You have to redesign the codes and all that. I think that maybe it's not what I see as the future, but what I dream for the future is have tools that are more system agnostic, so that it doesn't care what system you're running on, and you can port your research codes really quickly, because that's very costly for us, and it's a big challenge. So I'm kind of hoping for that, but having, of course, more capacity and doing more in less time, as Andrew said, is really, really critical. And especially when we think about forecasting. So in earthquakes, we also do forecasting. If there's a big event, we have ways to compute the probabilities over the next few hours and so on. So I think we need also is on-demand computing. So it's not, and I think, Andrew, you're probably using that more than us. Usually we plan our runs, and sometimes we take a system for a month to do runs, but there are times for certain problems, we need like the short-term demand.
Mm-hmm. And Andy, what's next for your area?
Yeah, I think it's similar to Christine's comments, actually. We suffer the same issues, that we have to rewrite some of our code if new HPC systems are coming up. But I think, like, I'm very excited about this new HPC architectures, and especially Exascale. And like high resolution modeling is a big piece of that. Like, we really need a higher resolution models that are more physical. What we're using at the moment is very parameterized. So this will allow us to do much more impactful research on local scales. And I also want to echo what Christine said with the data sharing, because what we are really hoping as well is to have a global community that can work on this challenging topics together. And at the moment, it's really mostly Western countries that can have access to the data and that can run these simulations. So having more cloud solutions would really liberate, especially the global South, and bring in a lot of talent into our research field.
Mm-hmm. And Andrew, I know you have some very special ideas for the future around cancer. Maybe you could share a little bit more about that.
Yeah, in echo that comment, you know, it's not a surprise we have less COVID data from Africa. It's because the infrastructure computing often to do the analysis isn't there. And so cloud computing is a huge gain for us. But yeah, I think cancer is a big one. So, you know, the mRNA vaccines we deployed for coronavirus were originally designed to combat cancer. These are the first class of vaccines that you can only design once you figure out the genetic code of your opponent. They're very fast to design. Once you have the code, you can change them quickly, which is why we have Omicron vaccines already. But the design, we knew we would apply to a pandemic sooner or later, unfortunately, but you will in the future have personalized medicine, where you will have a vaccine that targets the cancer that you have personally. So your immune system gets involved in fighting your cancer. When you take a chemical chemotherapy, it's an assault into your entire body. Side effects are horrible, and some cancers are untreatable because you can't get the drug to the tissue. But if you can use genomics to sequence a cell from your tumor, to find something that's unique about this tumor, which we know tumors has, you can tune a vaccine that puts your own immune system to attack your own tumor. But that will be person by person. There's no generalized answer. So in medicine, this is what we talk about, whether it be cancer, infectious disease, aging, Crohn's, depression. We're really moving to the age of personalized medicine. A lot of that's driven by genomics. Through, you know, and the other side to say to that is those researchers now come to us because we've developed high performance computing. We worry about, you know, Moore's law and Kreider's law as computer scientists, but we joke around that the real challenge is Costner's law. If you build it, they will come. And with these computing here, people are doing experiments maybe 2 years ago they wouldn't even thinking of doing, because they could generate the data, but they couldn't do the computation. So we're seeing people use this computing now to look at how your gut bacteria affect your response to depression treatment. So there's a lot of really interesting benefit to come from this.
So exciting to think about the number of problems that you could tackle now. And I'd add, it's so important to hear these stories from you all. And I think we all have to tell the stories of the tech for good that we're doing, because the future workforce needs to hear the opportunities that are out there for them and using technology to contribute to these solutions. And we need a diverse population to help participate in solutioning these problems. So it's an exciting time to be participating and to be solving these problems. And I certainly want to encourage any of our listeners today to reach out to any of us around what opportunities there could be to join forces on some of these projects. So with that, I'd like to wrap up. I want to thank you all, Christine, Andreas, and Andrew, for your time and your wisdom and all of your hard work and research in these spaces. It's very inspiring, and we're proud to be a partner of yours in working on these projects. And I want to thank our listeners for taking the time to listen in to this really important topic, and hope we've inspired you a little bit more today. Thank you.
Thank you, Janice.
Thank you.
We are at the cutting edge of human progress with this stuff, which leads us to today's hot take, Exacelebration! We celebrate because of the massive impact of this new level of computing, speed, and power will have on everything. In fact, I've calculated the scale of the impact with this formula. X times 10 to the 18th power equals celebration. X is anything and everything you can plug into it. Humanity, aviation, weather, whatever you can think of, multiply that times the power of supercomputing now at exascale speed, and the result will certainly be worthy of a major celebration. You don't believe me? Okay, let's test it out. Healthcare. This is perfect, really. All fields of science are about to advance by 10 to the 18th power. Think of the impact supercomputing-powered research, design, and development will have on the treatment and management of diseases. I'm talking everything from cancer to COVID. Geology at 10 to the 18th power will allow us to better prepare our response to natural disasters like hurricanes, earthquakes, droughts, tsunamis, and maybe even the next Martin Short Hulu series. When it comes to sustainable energy, we'd be able to develop more efficient and cost-effective ways to harness wind, waves, and solar to improve life on this planet and beyond. You see what I'm saying, folks? It's all in the formula. What would you plug in for X? I'm joined by Gabe Turner, HPC Solutions Architect for 3M. Gabe, welcome to Exascale Day.
Thanks, John. Happy to be here.
Gabe, can you tell us a little bit about what you do at 3M?
Yeah. So really, over the course of my career, I've spent 22 years really building scientific computing solutions for physicists. And so, I've continued that at 3M, and I advise our modeling and simulation experts, sometimes we call them predictive engineers, in how they can get their scientific computing workloads done more quickly, more efficiently, with more productivity.
What sort of products and things do those folks work on? Things that we might know about?
Oh, yeah. Well, so 3M is actually 120 years old this year. So we've been around since 1902. We've got 60,000 different products in the consumer marketplace, other industries, and really you might know about, say, N95 respirators. So these are top of mind as part of the, as a result of the pandemic. And 3M actually has more than doubled its production of these respirators. You might have heard of things like Filtrete furnace filters. That's a 3M product. And lots of different tapes and adhesives. A lot of people know 3M for tape, but it's not even the biggest product we make, but it certainly is in everybody's homes.
So you talked about N95 masks, which is definitely something we can all relate to. How has supercomputing really impacted those types of consumer products?
Well, although it might not seem very obvious, I can't think of a 3M product that doesn't involve supercomputing in some way. So when it comes to something like an N95 mask or any other type of 3M respirator, not only is the development of the fiber materials that go into that, a lot of modeling and simulation goes into that, the manufacturing process for producing these, and we have a collaboration around that with University of Chicago and Argonne National Laboratories, but also all the way to the operations of an entire manufacturing plant. Can be simulated and analyzed to improve, energy efficiency inside of the plant.
Wow. Okay. So everything from design to production can be impacted by supercomputing. You mentioned that you were working with Argonne National Lab. What can you tell me about that?
Yeah, so there's a program that's been around for a number of years now, the HPC for Manufacturing program, and 3M received a grant and has been collaborating with the University of Chicago and Argonne National Laboratory. And what we're investigating is in fact the manufacturing process for what we call melt blown fibers. So these are the fibers that go into things like an N95 respirator. And what's interesting about the manufacturing process of those respirators or filters or things like our thinsulate material that you might find in jackets and gloves is if the fibers are actually blown onto some kind of surface. And so inside of 3M for decades, we've had really, for lack of a better term, artisans. So people who are really experts in understanding or figuring out how does the airflow impact the quality of the product. But we've never really understood it at really, really fine detail. It's almost like, it's become an art, but we kind of want to understand what's behind the art, right?
Sure.
Yeah, and so really it's the world-class systems at Argonne National Labs and part of this collaboration where we can run some really, really high resolution simulations of this airflow with the eventual goal of understanding, how does it really work from a physics perspective? Can we predict how changes to the airflow might impact our product performance? And then can we really produce what we call a surrogate model? So that's to use kind of an artificial intelligence machine learning approach that is taught from these high resolution simulations, and then can predict what kind of product we might get by changing the airflow. As you might imagine, in a manufacturing setting, we're operating 24/7. We can't just start making changes to the manufacturing line. It's very time consuming and very expensive. So we do this, I'll call it an in silico laboratory, inside the computer. In the computer, we can have thousands of different manufacturing lines running, right, to test all sorts of different airflow designs. And so that's really how this impacts things like our respirator products or furnace filter products or insulation products.
Yeah, neat. I hadn't thought about that, about the design and the fibers and how simulating that can lead to more efficiency, better performing products, all of that stuff. And you're able to do that without actually building any of it first. Has got to be terribly efficient. It makes me wonder about other forms of efficiency. I mean, has supercomputing helped 3M at all with, let's say, energy efficiency or any of those other sort of sustainability metrics that we care about so much lately?
Yeah, in fact, the collaboration with U of Chicago and Argonne National Labs is really around energy efficiency. So the idea being, we know what kind of product we want to make. Let's say it is a respirator. But maybe the way that we currently are, I'll call it shaping the turbulence of the airflow to get that product, maybe it's not the most energy efficient way. And so by developing this model, we can better understand maybe there's a better lower energy consumption path to getting our end product. And that actually helps 3M meet or it contributes to meeting our sustainability goals. So we do have a goal of improving energy efficiency by 30% by 2025. And so, obviously, as a manufacturing company, a large amount of the energy that we consume is in our manufacturing process. So by using a supercomputer, which to basically run lots of manufacturing lines up front in a very efficient way, the goal is to really improve that energy efficiency and reduce energy consumption.
Outstanding. Yeah, I've certainly heard a lot about 3M sustainability initiatives that are out there. It's definitely part of the brand that we see. Is there anything else, Gabe? I mean, this has been super, super interesting, hearing what 3M's doing. Is there anything else that you want to share with us that maybe we didn't cover quickly?
Yeah, I would say, despite the importance of supercomputing, it is kind of a behind the scenes sort of thing. You know, although the scientists and engineers that benefit from it and use it, they know a lot about it. Really, the general public doesn't really know that much other than the word supercomputer. It's like, supercomputer, what is that? Well, I'm really honored to be kind of a focus or invited here to participate in Exascale Day and try to bring more light to this thing that I'm really passionate about and have really dedicated my career to, and hope to inspire more people to get into this field.
Gabe, thanks for joining us today. It has been a fantastic conversation, hearing how 3M is leveraging supercomputing, both for design purposes as well as even meeting its sustainability objectives. Super impressive stuff. Glad you could join us today. Thanks.
Thank you for having me, John.
Up next, two leading women in our industry share practical ways that organizations can encourage, hire, and promote diversity.
Welcome and thank you everyone for joining us today for a discussion on encouraging diversity in high-performance computing. I'm Shinwen Kuo, Senior Vice President and Chief Operating Officer for Hewlett-Packard Enterprise's high-performance computing and AI business, and I'm pleased to be joined today by Alison Kennedy, who serves as the UK Science and Facilities Council's Strategic Advisor for high-performance computing and AI, and also founded Women in High-Performance Computing. Alison, you've had a fascinating career journey with some unexpected beginnings. Can you share more with our viewers about your journey to high performance computing and what led you to found Women in HPC?
Of course I can. So I was lucky enough to come into computing at a time when there was diversity, largely because there was a very, very small number of people, not women, people coming out with computer science degrees or who had a background in programming. So my background, my degrees in history and politics, but I also have a background in languages. I studied classics and French and Russian. And this was enough to convince computing companies that I had a background in modern languages, which would equip me well to be a programmer. So I started off as a systems programmer, writing assembler for small computers. I then moved to be a telephony programmer, and then I went to work on software for automated teller machines. And throughout that process, I was learning about replication, about interrupt-driven programming on a single processor. And these were all things which would come in useful in later life, although I didn't know it at the time. I also moved on to do some work on being software product management, because I was always interested in the why are we doing this and how is it going to be used. And I reached a stage in my career when I wanted to have a family. I then asked my employers if I could work part-time, although because they've been funding me full-time, to do a degree part-time, and they said, no, we don't take part-time workers. So that was really my first indication that the tech world wasn't really well equipped to deal with diverse demands. So I went off, did a range of other jobs, and at one stage I went on a returner's course because I thought I'm going to have to learn a bit more about small computers because I'd always worked on large ones. And that was where I met a couple of guys from the Edinburgh Parallel Computing Centre, and they said to me, we have a job opening that might suit you. The requirement is you must not be a physicist, and we want someone who will go out around the university and talk to different departments about the potential of using high performance computing. So that was my first entry into it. And 40 years on, I've 30 years on, I think, in high performance computing. I've had a really interesting career. I worked on large European projects, and I've seen how things are done in other countries. I've been the director of two of the biggest supercomputing centres in the UK, EPCC and the Hartree Centre. And I've also been a founder of Women in HPC. So I'll tell you a little bit more about how that came about. When at EPCC, we got our first large contract to be a national service provider. And this offered us funding so we could send people to the States to go to the large supercomputing conferences. So up till then, I'd always worked in environments which were fairly diverse, with a reasonable number of women, a range of nationalities. But going out to supercomputing with a number of younger women as well, they in particular were really shocked by the environment there. It was very, very masculine. It was difficult perhaps to go into some of these big meetings where you would be the only woman there and to make your points. And generally the women thought, this is not the environment for us. So when we came back, we decided that we wanted to do some research and some studies into why are there not more women working in HPC and how could we change things for the better. So I was fortunate that our program manager was very supportive of this. She helped us get a network grant for it. And from that came the initial funding to do some research into why there weren't as many women working in HPC, and to allow us to set up the workshops at Supercomputing and ISC that became the foundation of expanding women in HPC into a global organization. So Xinwen, would you like to tell me a little bit more about your career path and whether this resonates with your experiences?
Thanks, Allison. Everything you've described absolutely resonates in terms of the stories that we've seen and heard from peers and colleagues and young women and other diverse talent coming up in not just high performance computing, but more broadly speaking, technology fields. The ability to see ourselves in the narrative or to overcome the gap in seeing ourselves in the narrative can sometimes be determinative. I actually started my career out in chemical engineering. That was my course of study. And I think sometime around the time I was 50 feet up in a pipe rack in a process engineering plant in flame retardant gear and a hard hat and steel-toed boots during an internship, I thought perhaps I might consider other options. And so when I finished my course of study, I actually started in strategy consulting with the Boston Consulting Group, which was a wonderful foundation for learning business perspectives. And so when you talk about moving from programming into product management, understand how decisions get made and why we do things a certain way. BCG was a wonderful foundational, it was almost like a graduate course of study immediately after undergrad. And after a 2-year program there, I felt the desire to help build a business and build something. So I joined a technology startup, which gave me the opportunity to go abroad to Europe and then later to base in the UK as we built the Northern European operations and the business there. London was a wonderful experience and also an incredibly diverse peer group and skill set. We took the company public. We were later acquired by a competitor and I helped support the integration in Europe, and then made the decision to go on a sabbatical to mainland China. So I based myself there for about 6 months before deciding to move back to the US, join another startup, and then at this time actually based in the DC, Northern Virginia area. I later decided to join a large proper company under the hypothesis that would be more stable, I'd be off the road. So I joined EDS, I think a few months before HP announced the acquisition. So that was, I definitely got larger. We became a much larger company. And I've had a wonderful set of opportunities for different and diverse experiences within HP, EDS, HP, now Hewlett Packard Enterprise, to build different functions and global corporate functions, to lead mergers and acquisitions transactions, to lead our joint venture business and build operations with our mainland China joint venture partner in H3C, and then most recently to build out operations in high performance computing and AI to enable us to scale the support and service delivery organization that helps our customers bring up these large systems and supports them through the life of the system. So when I think about my career, it's really been characterized by that arc of problem solving, leading teams to build and transform and turn around different organizations. And that diversity of experiences, geographies, peer sets, has really helped me see challenges and opportunities from different perspectives. And so when I think about why we're here, why we're even talking about diversity in high performance computing and AI, I think about the core problems that we're seeking to solve. And if we think about AI, it's increasingly embedded in tools that affect our everyday lives, both professionally and personally, from the voice recognition on our phones. I asked Siri for the weather report this morning, self-driving cars, banking and financial investment, to medical diagnosis and healthcare management. So if we think about the complexities of the problems we're tackling, it's clear that what got us here won't get us there. Or as Einstein famously said, we can't solve our problems with the same thinking we used when we created them. And solving those new problems, increasingly complex problems, requires diverse perspectives and skill sets to expand the boundaries of our current thinking, and also to make the solutions relevant and accessible to the broadest possible population. Allison, I'm really curious your perspectives on, I think you and I are both in vehement agreement about the value of diversity in solving new problems. And I'm curious about what you've seen and experienced in solving the types of problems that we're solving with technology.
Absolutely. We are in agreement here. I think you'll remember that earlier on I said my first job in HPC was to come in and speak to departments outside physics to broaden the uptake of high performance computing. And that was in 1993. Now we've moved on a huge amount in the intervening years. As you've said, we now see high performance computing being used in a whole range of science areas. Interestingly, many of these science areas are ones where women are much better represented than they are in the physical sciences. If you look at environmental science, many areas of chemistry, particularly areas like green chemistry, earthquake modeling, fusion, a whole range of areas. There are already a big span of different technology experts working there, and people with similar mentalities, but coming from a diverse background. And to solve many of these challenging problems, we know that we have to build diverse teams. We're no longer at the stage where one person with some expertise can work on their own to solve a grand challenge. We need to put together teams of people, AI experts, HPC experts, domain science experts, a whole range of people to work on that. And it's inevitable that as we grow these teams, we need to look at diversity and how this will contribute, not just to achieving the scientific objectives, but to putting together a range of people who can work closely together to deliver the results.
I agree 100%. So we've talked about the noble grand vision for the problems we're solving and why this can be a compelling space for people to want to join. I'll also talk about the challenge that we're facing as companies and organizations in the current talent environment. We are thirsty for talent because the supply is far exceeded by the demand in all the sciences, as well as in other disciplines that can help contribute to solving these challenges. So in an environment where the demand far exceeds the supply, how do we get better at leveraging the opportunity to attract diverse talent and to tap into those pools? Because we know capability is evenly distributed, but opportunity is not necessarily. So I'm curious your perspectives. We've spent a lot of time talking about women in high performance computing and in tech, and obviously we're both women in high performance computing and technology. And there are lots of other diverse pools of talent that may not be as visibly represented. I'm curious your perspective on how we meet the moment in terms of demands for talent.
I think, again, this is obviously a challenge for everybody working in the space. For me, one of the most exciting things about being in this area is the work we do is meaningful work. You can see that it's going to potentially have a massive influence on what happens in the future. It really is game-changing technology. So that's something that makes it an attractive area to work in. I think as an organization, as a community, we're no longer at the stage where someone who's worked in the area for 20 years necessarily knows more about a particular area than someone who's just graduated. So again, that's an area where we need to work closely together, because the people coming in with the knowledge of the new techniques, we need them to supplement some of the knowledge from people who've worked in the field for a long time. So again, that's upsetting the traditional way of doing things. We need to be very open to training people coming in, and we need to think very carefully about what skills are actually needed. For example, in my organization, we used to say that people needed degrees in physical sciences or mathematics. When we looked at it, particularly for data scientists, we realized that people who were coming out with biology or psychology degrees probably had enough mathematics to make a really good career in data science. So we were much more open about that. We would bring in people from these backgrounds, and they tended to be a more diverse cross-section of the community. Another area which I think is really interesting for the future is looking at neurological differences. For example, many of the traits that are evident in autism and ADHD, ability to recognize patterns, attention to detail, being ability to concentrate on tasks for a long time. These are the sorts of things that we really can make use of in our industry. Would you agree?
I absolutely agree. I love what you said in touching upon different points of diversity. So not just gender diversity, but also age and experience diversity, diversity of disciplines and diversity of background, neurodiversity, as well as this theme that we've seen of people wanting to be part of something, solving a problem that's something bigger than themselves, as part of an organization that allows them to bring the best of themselves, their most authentic self and skill sets to bear. So as we think about what companies need to know and what organizations can do differently, I'm curious your perspective, any lessons learned on how to create that more inclusive environment and how to attract that diverse talent as from your experience in the space?
I can give you a couple of examples of where I've seen action having results. So the first one is if you look at the ECP program in the States, the leaders of each of the work streams there's a male lead and a female lead who work very closely together. So that's a huge program, and it means that it's very visible that you have some really excellent women and some really excellent men working together to frame a program. In Europe, where I've seen a similar thing was on the scientific steering board of the PRACE project. What typically happens is it's a revolving membership, and people will write in and suggest people who could be members of the board. So we looked at the gender diversity there. And one small change we made was that if you were going to nominate someone, you had to nominate, in fact, 3 people, one of whom had to be a man, one of whom had to be a woman, and the third one could be either. Now, that meant that people had to think about a wider range of people, a wider range of nominations, and over a couple of years, that completely changed the complexion of the board. So there are areas where taking small steps can have really good consequences. Role models, making people think about what to do, changing the culture and the environment that we're operating in.
One of the things you just touched on reminds me, there's a saying in business that what gets measured gets done from an incentive perspective. So the goals that we pursue as an organization, the metrics by which we measure our success collectively as leaders and individuals matters, right? Because it lays the track for the path that we pursue. So as I think about what companies can do differently and better, and some of what HPE is already doing, we can align our metrics with what our values are as an organization. And in many cases, we are looking at leading and lagging indicators of what attracts diverse talent by looking at where we have different levels of diversity by which we report. And I think that's absolutely critical as we think about and measure our success on how we create more inclusive and diverse teams to solve these problems. And if I think about If I think about, this conversation, do you have a vision for what happens 5, 10, 20 years on when we're doing the next panel about, diverse talent and high performance computing?
Obviously, I would like to see the pace of change accelerate. I think when I look back, I can see that we've made real inroads, but there's still a lot more to do. But one of the things I think that encourages me, I have 2 daughters. I have a son as well. But of my daughters, one of them's a medical doctor. And if you look back, medicine is traditionally an area that was male dominated, but now it's at least 50% female dominated. So we do know that professions can change over time. My younger daughter is a network security engineer. She also has a languages background. She has a degree in Russian. She did a conversion course. She worked for a while before moving over. She's also worked in HPC. And she said to me, I knew if you could do it, Mum, I could do it. So the importance of think of role models and of people like us being visible and being prepared to talk about, to be open about the challenges perhaps that we've faced, but about what a rewarding career it is. Across organizations, I think we need to encourage mentorship and allies. So a mentor is where, as you'll know, a mentor is where you have one person who works with you to help to develop your career. An ally can be anybody from your organization who helps to change the culture and promote a level playing field. So it can be somebody in a meeting calling out bad behavior. For example, if a woman makes a point and a man then repeats it, if you're at that meeting, you could say, well, thank you, John. Thank you for articulating what Jane has already said. So just to be clear that we all need to take responsibility for making our workplaces inclusive and a place that people want to stay. So it's, as you said, diversity is important, but inclusivity is what will keep people in HPC and keep them in the organization. And that's, I think, the challenge for us now. When there's so much competition, we have to make people feel that this is a space that they want to belong in and that they want to stay in and that new people want to move into.
Thank you. Thank you for those great points on mentorship, allyship, and also personal responsibility and ability to make an impact. We're all in this journey together as a community to help make things better. So we think this is an exciting space that has a place for lots of diverse talent. I hope our viewers agree. And if you or someone you know is interested in learning more about opportunities in high performance computing and AI, I would encourage you to check out the Exascale Computing Project, Hewlett Packard Enterprise's website and LinkedIn pages. And of course, Women in HPC. There are lots of good materials, including job opportunities posted there. Thank you again, Allison, so much for your time and your insights today, for sharing more about your career journey. I've enjoyed meeting you virtually. I look forward to actually meeting you in person when I take you up on that invitation to visit in Scotland. I'll be coming around for a cuppa.
Thank you very much. I've really enjoyed speaking to you too.
Thanks, Allison.
It's great to hear the stories about how these women have made such a difference in the supercomputing space. But let's keep it real. We've got a lot of work to promote more diversity. Hey, I'm here, so that's definitely some progress, but this is a long-term commitment. Speaking of keeping it real, we've got a real exascale machine that we can talk about today. In this next panel, let's hear from leaders at Oak Ridge, Argonne, and Lawrence Livermore National Laboratories about how they are approaching some of the most challenging problems facing humanity.
Hi, I'm Trish Damkruger, Senior Vice President and Chief Product Officer for HPE's High Performance Computing and AI Business Unit. I joined HPE earlier this year, and I'm super excited to be at the market leader of high performance computing. We've been celebrating Exascale Day since 2019, when Cray and the US Department of Energy registered it as a national holiday. So until this year, we've really been focused on imagining Exascale, But this year we actually get to talk about achieving exascale. And I'm super excited to be here with this esteemed panelists from Oak Ridge, Argonne, and Lawrence Livermore National Labs to talk about their journey to exascale and also the scientific impact of exascale computing. So let's start out with Gina. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Gina Turasi. I'm the director of the National Center for Computational Sciences and the Leadership Computing Facility at the Oak Ridge National Lab.
I'm Bronis Sosapinski. I'm the Chief Technology Officer for Livermore Computing at Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory, and LC is the High Performance Computing Center there.
I'm Tim Williams, Deputy Director of the Computational Science Division at Argonne National Lab.
So thank you. So exascale, 10 to the 18th, the billion transactions. You know, high performance computing is about driving, modeling, and simulation, but it's also about convergence with AI and data science. So Tim, why don't you start us up? What is Argonne hoping the outcomes of exascale will drive?
We actually know exactly what the first science on Aurora will be, our exascale system at Argonne. You know, our early science program has 19 projects already underway, and they all propose very specific scientific run campaigns for Aurora. And they'll execute these on using pre-production computer time grants on the system next year. You know, these touch on areas of science from, you know, cancer modeling and treatment, both simulation and control of tokamak fusion devices, aerodynamics, cosmology, you know, simulation, as well as experimental observational data analysis. You know, fundamental particle physics, simulation, but also experimental data analysis, biophysics, brain connectomics, solar energy, and a host of other areas. We used the exascale system and plans for it to focus efforts at the Leadership Computing Facility at Argonne to incorporate data intensive computing and AI or machine learning for science as peers to the traditional simulation-based HPC. And for example, in the early science program, we explicitly called for projects with data science and AI techniques incorporated in them.
We'll move over to Bronis, and you know, I was at Lawrence Livermore with Bronis, and we were talking about exascale way back when I was there, and all the workloads that need exascale. So talk to me about the importance of exascale for Lawrence Livermore.
Well, for our society in general, large computations have the ability to improve the world, whether it's better modeling, simulations, and predictions of things like hurricanes or earthquakes or other things, natural phenomenons like COVID, or just a matter of helping us protect our national security. The ability to model, simulate, or use advanced AI models and data analysis really can help us achieve dramatic improvements in the way the world is.
So Gina, Oak Ridge has an exascale machine. You know, what's the top list for you and the scientists and engineers there?
So both Tim and Bronis gave a very good outline of the types of problems that we expect exascale computing to help us tackle, both scientific and engineering challenges, and achieve solutions that are at least 5 to 10 times faster than what currently possible with the existing leadership computing systems. What our facility is focusing on is definitely problems that require transformative solutions with great societal impact. Problems that relate to climate change, clean and sustainable energy, as well as precision medicine. These are some examples that attract a lot of attention in the scientific community, and all of the teams have been working very closely with applications. All of these applications are great examples of how we need to integrate traditional modeling and simulation with AI, either because we need to create higher fidelity physical systems, like in a typical example of climate change, because we need to have more accurate predictions of extreme weather events, or to go to the other extreme. We need to push advances in biology, and biological systems are not physical systems, they are chaotic systems. So I'm very excited about these advances that we expect to see across a spectrum of very important challenges for the 21st century and for humanity.
Love it. So I'm going to stick with you, Gina. You know, Frontier surpassed an exaflop. In fact, you know, the date is recorded here at HPE, May, 6:15 a.m. You know, tell us about that moment and the fun we've had since then.
Well, Trish, certainly it is an unforgettable moment. I woke up from the sound of the text. I recall reading it, and I wasn't sure if I was in a dream. So I had the iPhone to my husband, and I asked him, "Are we in a dream or are we awake?" And he said, "This is not a dream." So the HPL team was working around the clock, as you know very well. But the night before, I thought that we had just run out of time. So clearly, luck played a role. But also the team's experience, the hard work, and the perseverance set the foundation for success.
I love it. That's a great story. I didn't know you thought you were dreaming. So, and recently you've had the inauguration event in August. You know, what is the mood at the lab being the first US exascale or first exascale, and, you know, just kind of the impact that it's going to have?
So the excitement was palpable. The inauguration event also exemplified, to me at least, that indeed it takes a village to achieve such breakthroughs. We had the leadership of the three partners in crime, Oak Ridge, HPE, and AMD. We had leadership from DOE and Oscar, whose support and encouragement has been critical to the team's performance and morale. But also we had leadership from GE. And GE has been a long-term user of our facility and one of the first teams, industrial teams, that will access Frontier. And to me, as the leadership computing facility director, the user's validation enthusiasm is the most rewarding, because ultimately scientific impact is what matters the most. And we had all of these pieces together that day.
Yes, I agree. I mean, it's a machine for the scientists and engineers to use. Yeah. Okay, so Tim, tell us about Argonne and Aurora. You know, what's new in the system? What are you all excited about?
Aurora, Argonne's exascale system, is being built as we speak. All the HPE Cray racks, the power and cooling, all of those systems are up and running. And the current task is populating it with the compute boards. We're assembling a small number of racks of the system with the compute boards first, and those will form our test and development system called Sunspot, which we hope to get into the hands of early users later this year. Aurora itself, it'll be greater than 2 exaflops in peak performance. It's a GPU accelerated system like Frontier and El Capitan, but it's accelerated by Intel's new discrete GPUs, the PVC or Ponte Vecchio accelerators. It has a similar network fabric to Frontier, a Cray slingshot, with each node having 8 points coming into that in a Dragonfly. One of the interesting innovations in Aurora is the I/O system. So rather than a file system, it's an object store, which is called DEOS. And it's all solid state embedded in the compute fabric. And because it is an object store, it's able to break some of the limits of block-based file systems to give what we think will be a real step change in I/O performance of over 25 terabytes per second of read-write speeds. So
very cool. Yeah, I didn't know Sunspot was the test and develop. That's very catchy with Aurora. I like it. Okay, Ronis, I know you're dying to tell us about El Capitan. Tell us, what's going on there and what are you excited about?
Well, the science that I was talking about before is why we build these machines. But, I'm a computer scientist, so it's the technology that gets my interest up. So, first of all, we're making a lot of good progress. These big system acquisitions are multi-year projects. Typically, they include some early delivery systems that help the application teams get ready. So, as you're aware, we've cited 3 what we're calling kind of early access systems 3, the third generation of actually early access systems in the El Capitan project at Livermore. And those are very similar architectures to Frontier. There's some small differences, but they're very similar. We have systems with 24, 32, and 40 nodes. The smallest of those systems is, as I said, a 24 node system that ended up placing at number 200 on the top 500. So by some measure, with just 24 nodes, it's the 200th most capable computer in the world. So while it's a lot smaller at 24 nodes than the 9400 in Frontier, it shows you just how powerful the individual nodes are there. We're doing a whole bunch of other things that are very, really going to drive the system to be not only for El Capitan to not only be as powerful, a significantly more powerful system than we've had at Livermore in the past, but also to be an easier to use system. So like Aurora, we're also doing some innovative stuff in the I/O space. So with HPE, we're putting in something called the Rabbit modules, or near node local storage. And those essentially create supernodes connected by PCIe networks out of a small subset of the compute nodes and one Rabbit module forming kind of one of these supernodes. We've also been working closely with HPE and AMD on improving the programming environments, helping figure out ways to have your compiler suites interoperate, and to have the kind of user environment that HPE deploys be more consistent, again, with our other systems, and using a tool that was developed at Livermore called SPAC.
That's great. And it is all, like we said, these are machines for our scientists and engineers to use, and developer productivity is key. It's one of the big things that, yes, we continue to work with. Thank you for all of these updates. I think, Gina, like you said, it takes a village. It truly is a partnership. HPE has been just thrilled to be able to be the partners with all the US Exascale machines. And I know we're going to have enable amazing innovation and scientific discoveries. So we talked a little bit about science, and again, it's why we all are the Department of Energy made these investments in the machines. And so I'd love to hear a little bit more, maybe let's start with Gina, about kind of the science that has happened, the early science runs, and any updates you want to share there.
Sure. We already have a few teams working on Frontier right now as part of the testing phase. These are primarily teams from the different ECP applications, from computational fluid dynamics, material science, high energy physics, and from cancer surveillance. So these are some of the teams that are taking advantage of Frontier, and they are helping us with, the testing phase, the acceptance phase, where we have to focus on performance, robustness, and functionality, stability and functionality. Also, for those who have seen the announcement of the Gordon Bell finalists, there is one team that has used Frontier to demonstrate a new method for data mining an enormous amount of biomedical literature to build a knowledge graph of scientific concepts that can be used for hypothesis generation, for finding potentially undiscovered treatments for COVID-19, as they have done before. So this team demonstrated exaflop performance on Frontier using the full system. So already we have teams kicking the tires and making sure that the system will be ready for user operation at the targeted date.
Perfect. And I mean, I know you have your internal teams. You briefly mentioned GE. You want to tell us more about the commercial organizations and kind of what they're hoping to achieve?
Sure. With the leadership, the DOE leadership computing facilities, there is often the misconception that these are resources available only to the DOE scientists, and this is not the case. Actually, we support a very broad community of users from academia, industry, and of course, other federal agencies. So this has been happening since the inception of the leadership computing facilities, and we have what we call the Industrial Partnership Program. And we've been working with several different entities to help them effectively supercharge their competitiveness and realize bottom line benefits. As I mentioned earlier, General Electric is one of our industry partners or users through this Industrial Partnerships Program that have been with us for many, many years, and they have used the technology for their scientific advances. Right now, the GE team is leveraging Summit, and soon they will be transitioning. They're the first industry team to be transitioning to Frontier to design more energy efficient jet engines. So their goal is to achieve more reliable and powerful wind turbines, which will make them cost effective. So they are doing this by trying to improve the fidelity of the simulations of the turbulent aeroacoustic model they have, which will enable sustainable aviation. This is the long-term goal. So this is a very exciting project they're working on. Of course, this is just one example. We have other examples, particularly now with biotechnology companies becoming a very efficient user of the resources with drug discovery.
That is great. And I know we talk about Exascale, and also not only it seems to be so pigeonholed into just, these national labs that can really take advantage of it. And I love that industry is coming in and able to take advantage of an Exascale machine. Such a great message. Okay, Bronis, Gina talked about sustainability. I know, energy sustainability is one of the goals that we talk about, or we would talk about at Lawrence Livermore. So tell me about some of the first science that's going to happen on El Capitan.
El Capitan is an NNSA, Advanced Simulation and Computing Program System. So for the longer term lifetime of the system, it will be contributing towards our national security mission for stockpile stewardship. But early on, we expect to be running a range of science applications, and one in particular that we've been developing over the last couple of years called IceCap. IceCap is a pretty complicated application that is using AI models to allow us to simulate with greater fidelity the processes being used in NIF by replacing some of the physics models and allowing us to run more detailed and longer simulations than we might otherwise run. And then with a system of the scale of El Capitan, we expect to be able to really do a much broader sweep of the possible parameter space. And so one, we're hoping that will provide us, these similar simulations were critical even in getting to where we already are on NIF, but we're hoping that these results that we'll be getting on El Capitan will help us achieve that final measure of ignition.
So Tim, do you have is Aurora going to help some other kind of energy research?
Indeed. It's, as a scientist, it's hard for me to pick favorites among what I know will be done on Aurora. I'll start with CS Chang's early science project. So this is another energy related project, the other kind of fusion, magnetic confinement fusion, in contrast with inertial confinement fusion, as they do at NIF at Livermore that Bronis told us about. So Chang's project will use Exascale to allow realistic simulation of heavy tungsten ions coming off the ITER machine walls into the light fusion ion plasma to understand what that does to the dynamics. And this is an extremely important thing to understand for operation of ITER, but it's been absent from the more idealized petascale era plasma simulations that have been done in the past. Another project by Amanda Randalls will use in situ analysis of a running exascale simulation, which is important because one simply cannot output all of the data from these simulations. And this will be simulating using CFD and fluid structure interaction to understand the process of metastasis of cancer in the human vasculatory system. And those and many others I would love to talk about, time permitting, and as both of the other speakers have mentioned, the Exascale computing project has all kinds of applications which will be demonstrating scientific calculations on the Exascale machines.
I want you both to be successful in your fusion because the world needs fusion. I want the cancer research to be successful. I mean, this is why we do it, right? I just, I look back and we're talking about celebrating Exascale Day, and it's been 3 years. But really, when we look back at the history of the laboratories, probably over 50 years. I know at Lawrence Livermore was, in the 60 years when I was there. I'm not sure the age of Oak Ridge and Argonne specifically. And then I look at, we just celebrated the 50th anniversary of Cray, which to me is amazing. I mean, that's just kind of that whole grandfather of supercomputing and the impact that supercomputing has had at these laboratories for the last 5 decades. And so I think we all just need to sit back and celebrate Exascale Day, but also celebrate 50 years of supercomputing and the advances that we've been able to make. With that, I want to thank all of you. Really enjoyed the discussion, exciting session. I just think that not only as a geek getting excited about getting these machines up and running, but it's really what these machines can do. Thank you all. Happy Exascale Day.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Amazing work is being done. There's a lot to look forward to, and with that comes a lot of optimism, which leads me to my next hot take, things about supercomputing that I'm feeling really optimistic about. First, a new era of precision medicine, supercomputers using genetics, proteins, and lifestyle analysis to recommend custom treatments for individual patients. Fantastic! The next thing I'm optimistic about, supercomputing ushering in the next generation of AI, or as I like to call it, super AI. Imagine super AI empowering business insight and responsiveness to large data sets. Super AI giving meteorologists predictive modeling and anticipating natural disasters like hurricanes and unnatural disasters like this lasagna burger from Barney's Diner in Butte, Montana. For our last session, let's hear from the Department of Energy on how they're leveraging supercomputing.
My name is Justin Hotard. I'm the Executive Vice President and General Manager of the HPC and AI Business Unit and Labs at Hewlett-Packard Enterprise. And today I'm thrilled to be joined by Dr. Asmarit Assefa-Berhe to share a view from the US Department of Energy, what we call a view from the DOE. So Dr. Berhe, welcome.
Thank you, Justin. Really thrilled to join you.
I would love, Dr. Berhe, if we could start to get a little bit of your background. You're, of course, the Director of the Office of Science at the DOE, and would love to hear a little bit about your role and some of your background as well.
Since May, earlier this year in 2022, I've been serving as the Director of the Office of Science. And to do this role, I'm on leave from my position as a professor of soil biogeochemistry at the University of California in Merced. I'm a soil scientist by training. My work has been studying a lot around what the role that the soil system plays in regulating the Earth's climate. I also have a background in political ecology, where I've studied for a long time issues around land degradation. So this dynamic two-way relationship that human communities have with land and natural resources in general, and in particular centering around degradation of land resources. And even the climate work that I did addresses to a large degree what happens when soil is degraded, and the implications for that on the soil's ability to sequester carbon, i.e. take out carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and store it in soil in a way that contributes to addressing the climate crisis with natural mechanisms.
Your story is truly incredible, and of course, given that we sit on the supercomputing side of the Office of Science, as you were telling a bit of your background and story, I was thinking about the importance of computing, the power of supercomputing, and obviously as we go forward with Exascale, to really help us better understand and improve our understanding of the whole Earth system, and getting the kind of granularity necessary to understand all of these interactions. I mean, there's probably so much we could talk about in that area, but I would love to hear a little bit from you on the perspective you have on Exascale and the impact of supercomputing. I mean, we see, this is obviously the result of a long-term partnership between HPE and Cray before us, or alongside with us, I should say, prior to the acquisition, and also a lot of work with one of your labs, the Oak Ridge National Laboratory. But would love your perspective on on the potential for supercomputing, and certainly the work that that your team leads on the Exascale computing project.
Yeah, so as the Director of the Office of Science, one of the programs that we have in the office is the Advanced Scientific Computing Research Program, where the Exascale computing project was led out of, right? And to put it in a context first, the Office of Science is the nation's largest funder of fundamental research in the physical sciences, and OSCAR, or the Advanced Scientific Computing Program, is one of them, right? And through these programs for many years, obviously, the program, in partnership, important partners like your organization and others, have been working hand in hand for many years, starting from the conceptualization to actually realizing this effort that took many, many years and had to overcome a number of critical challenges, obviously. And I can't overstate how exciting this moment is, that dream is actually realized right now. That folks, scientists and engineers, and so many of them, both this and in our national labs, as well as their partners in industry, had tackled and worked successfully addressed, right? And among the many exciting aspects of the exascale computing systems and the project and the success that we're really excited about, and even more that we're looking forward in the future, obviously includes the ability to execute the next generation of Earth system science models, the exascale Earth system models that are so critical for us to be able to address the climate crisis. For example, giving us ability to simulate and model processes with a resolution that's really critical for execution of many of the programs, and even just for furthering the fundamental understanding that we have about interactions in the climate system and how they play out at different scales, right? For example, is partnership with industry, including companies like GE now, that's going to be made possible by this capability, so that working in partnership with our labs, they're able to design better and more efficient turbines for wind energy, right? Which will have incredible, again, implications for global energy production and reducing the overall greenhouse gas emissions and burden into the atmosphere that we have in the atmosphere. And you can also give examples in the health sector. Some of the incredibly important and timely questions that we can ask in partnership with pharmaceutical manufacturers and other researchers in the health sciences field, taking advantage of these powerful, fastest computing systems to rapidly sift through, right, the large libraries of molecules and proteins that they need to understand as they're trying to find solutions, so therapeutics, vaccines, and other things to address critical issues such as the COVID situation that we dealt with, and the development of the solutions that were needed in that space. Scientists are already starting to use these capabilities, but obviously we envision even more that's going to come going forward across multiple other areas. We see that the where we are right now with the exascale computing is just an incredible start, but there's a lot more to go, right? Including, you can argue that using AI to drive insights and discoveries that will allow us to sift through and use massive amounts of data with this capability, and many other implications across a number of the areas that I spoke about.
Dr. Berhe, what you covered, I think, are such compelling examples, and I know there's many others. I know that there's electrical grid modeling and other examples using satellite imagery as examples where we're going to enable exascale computers to really become time machines for how we scenario plan in the future. And in full disclosure, I borrowed that from Doug Cothey, who was, of course, leading the exascale computing project. It was his term, but I thought I would take it. But I think beyond that, what I also heard you say is this exascale era is also the beginning of really leveraging AI, being able to sift through data, vast amounts of data, in a manner that we can build truly intelligent machines. And I think that's also very exciting. What I wanted to touch on a little bit, if we can, is actually to look ahead at where we go next. I mean, it took us a great public-private partnership over a decade, a lot of work from a lot of individuals to get to this moment. But as you look ahead, what is your perspective on the next stage, right, for Office of Science and for the DOE, and I'm curious, of course, on where you see companies like ourselves being able to help.
We obviously think this is only the beginning. There's a lot to explore going forward. And there are a number of incredible things ahead that we would be able to apply the exascale computing system to address many major challenges that we have. So as excited as we are about all of these things we're going to be able to do with this capability, At the same time, though, we're also starting moving forward, looking towards what's in the future, right? What comes next? What is the next step in computing that is going to be important and groundbreaking and challenging, the kind of things we should be thinking about. As you know, the computing landscape moves so fast, and change happens so fast with new type of technologies, with chips and other things, and networking and other things that come, including so much of the inventions driven by your company and others in that space, right? So the way we see it going forward, we're really excited to continue to engage with companies like HPE in the private sector and all other kind of collaborators that to think about how we can advance the technologies forward, to think about the next set of grand challenges that need to be tackled, so that we keep pushing the frontiers forward, because we think that's incredibly important for obviously the scientific challenges that are addressed, but then the industries that and the future that are going to be enabled because we have those capabilities.
What I think is really exciting and what you touched on is the importance of leadership. And I think what's great about leadership, and much like Exascale did, but I think as we look ahead, we'll continue to do, is having that long-term view. It's not about incremental innovation. It's about what is really going to mean that we can deliver a breakthrough for science, for industry, for economic development, and obviously all of the different derivations around that. But it's sort of that long-term mindset where it allows us to invest in research with understanding that, look, some of the things we're going to do may not end up in a product or something that we actually use at scale, but it will progress the learning. And it gets us out of this mindset of having to solve for the next quarter, the next year, the next couple of years, because we're going after that shared goal, that shared mission. So I think it's, from our perspective, we're just feel so privileged to be a part of this partnership, and contributing to enabling American leadership, and ultimately scientific and industrial and leadership, as well as, of course, national security. So we feel very privileged as a part of that. And maybe what I'll say in closing is, we see the future that we're in now as really the beginning. The Exascale era is launching us into a new future. We've accelerated traditional modeling and simulations. We're now integrating AI. The convergence of modeling and simulation with AI at scale will continue to accelerate scientific research and enable insight. And I think it's also a really compelling bridge to what will obviously include quantum computing in the future as another way to accelerate and deliver breakthroughs. One of the things that I think is really critical about supercomputing in particular is it delivers real world impact. And you touched on so many of those today, so many of the problems or challenges we're facing that are not theoretical, they're real, but yet we can solve those problems with supercomputing. And what I'm really excited about with Frontier is not only have we broken a frontier of performance, we've broken a frontier of efficiency with Frontier at the top of the list of the Green 500. There's never been a supercomputer that's been in the top, let alone the number one supercomputer, but in the top 5 of each. And so this is really an incredible milestone. And from our perspective, as a unique player in the industry, the only global supercomputer provider, we want to continue to invest. We see this, the opportunity to enable AI at scale, new breakthroughs for modeling and simulation, and bridging to integrate and accelerate quantum computing is really compelling. Ultimately it fits back to HPE's purpose, which is to advance the way people live and work. So let me just close by saying thank you so much to Dr. Berhe for joining us. It was just a pleasure to hear your perspective, and honestly to get a bit of a larger perspective, because sometimes we spend time on the supercomputer, but understanding how it ultimately impacts all of the scientific initiatives that the U.S. Department of Energy invests in, how that benefits our country and ultimately our world. And then to be candid, to hear some of your background of how it links to fundamental research, I think is just really exciting. And for me, that's the great thing about being, in this part of the business and working with such great partners like the U.S. Department of Energy is, we get to learn and benefit from all of you. So I want to say thank you again, and we really appreciate the partnership.
Yeah, thank you, Justin. Really appreciate the partnership too, and obviously continuing to partnership with you all in delivering these kinds of major goals. Thank you.
Thank you.
I want to thank HPE for putting on this show today, and I also want to thank TechTarget, BrightTalk, and ESG for powering this event. Hopefully, we've shown you the power of Exascale and that supercomputing is something to celebrate. We hope you enjoyed it. See you next year. Happy Exascale Day!